It's giving me horse teeth. Hello all of you little demons, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, back again with another episode of the awesomely named and awfully hosted Tues Your Own Adventure, the weekly medieval themed format where I, the crown Jules of WhatCulture.com, take a list chosen by you, yes, you the person who got given a lot of syrups for their coffee, and I've just tried it for the first time here. I'm not really a syrupy drinker in this one, so we're going to try it together. This one is vanilla. I've made that way too sweet. Oh my god. Oh, wow. Oh, I can smell purple. That has sent me over the edge. Oh, yes, you get to decide what list I dole out to you each and every week. And this week we have none other to thank than Jake B for their suggestion of 8 video games that needed DLC. Now what I've done is I've done my usual finger Temple of Doom that I know that James hates. I know you hate it, James, but I've applied my own twist on the title a little bit here because we're going to be talking about video games today that not only needed DLC in order to fix problems that were in the original base game, but also ones that were carried, elevated to a new status because of their expansions, and also ones that just needed DLC that unfortunately never got them. So yeah, buckle up as it's going to be a wild ride as I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 video games that needed DLC. And you know the drill by now, say hi to me here in the live chat and pop your suggestions down below for next week's episode. With that in mind, let's get on with this list, shall we? Number 8, Fairer Fights, Remnants from the Ashes. Despite being lumbered with the title of
Dark Souls with guns,
Remnant from the Ashes turned out to be a truly brilliant experience that moved away from being just a shallow imitator and out into the sun of its own grandiose glory as a really intense co-op shooter. However, despite all the praise it garnered from both fans and critics alike, there was one element that really needed addressing, namely that when it came to boss battles, the amount of chaff that the big bad would summon was usually relentless. Seriously, in some cases you'd be spending more time shooting endless waves of goons more than the boss itself. And after this scenario cropped up again and again, tedium began to set in. Thankfully, the DLC Swamps of Courses and Subject 2923 fixed this immediately by presenting bosses that proved without a shadow of a doubt that they could stand very much on their own. The sheer variety of encounters here also provided a revitalizing breath of fresh air for the title. But the key win for fans here was the dissolution of the relentless slog that plagued the original experience. Much needed and much appreciated. Oh yeah, am I still doing the 2 thumbs up thing? I completely forgot about it. I knew I'd do this. I said to you, didn't I, that I'd introduce a new gimmick and then I'd forget about it 2 weeks later, and I did. On the money. But it's back, and this gets the old 2 thumbs seal of approval. Number 7, a brand new endgame, Vermintide 2 Chaos Wastes expansion. Now, I don't know if I've told you this before, James, but I do enjoy myself a bit of Warhammer. So, of course, when it came to Vermintide and Vermintide 2, I was pretty much knocking over tables with the massive lob-on this game gave me. The sugar is hitting hard, my friends. Anyway, back on track. When making a loot-based video game experience, it is very easy to balk the long-term goal of the project. I mean, as much fun as it can be for groups to forage for better items and weapons to take on tougher enemies in order to get better items and weapons to take on tougher enemies in order to get better items and weapons to take on tougher enemies. Oh my god! Once you become aware of the gameplay loop that you're in, if it doesn't have a significantly impactful endgame, well, it can lead a lot of players to voice the following question: what's the point? There are only so many times that you can beef up a reskinned enemy and apply a liberal dose of bullet sponge juice like baby oil all over them before players just simply get fed up. So the question is, what do you do? Well, if you're Fat Shark, the dev team behind the wonderful Vermintide series, you use an expansion to basically create a brand new game. Titled The Chaos Wastes, this 2021 update tasked players with taking on a series of escalating challenges across brand new maps, all with the goal of taking on one of the 4 Chaos Gods, until they are all bested by your hands. And for those of you who don't know about the 4 Chaos Gods, you've got Nurgle, who is basically a walking STD. You've got Tzeentch, who is a giant bird-like figure whose entire goal is to just mess with people's minds. You've got Slaanesh, who is not somebody who I think will be on the morality board anytime soon. And then you've got Korn, who is just plain angry. He is Jeremy my neck vein personified. But what made this new experience so refreshing was that the abilities and weapons that you could unlock, and then upgrade, and then imbue with new powers, were then carried forward towards your end goal, coupled with branching paths, Twitch integration that allowed audiences to bless or curse the party, and optional challenges within the levels. It all made Vermintide 2 feel like it received a new lease of life overnight. This was a monumental achievement no matter how you look at it, and has allowed the game to just basically coast past its 4-year anniversary, and it's just made everyone even more excited for the dev team's next outfit, which is going to be set in the 40k universe, and it's going to be titled Darktide, and it's going to be so good. So good. Number 6, finally understanding the plot. Final Fantasy 15. Now, it's not a bold statement to say that come the end of things in the Final Fantasy Best Boyathon known as Final Fantasy 15, because of all of the narrative twists and turns, betrayals, upheavals, new characters coming in and out of the narrative, things definitely started to look a bit, pretzel-like. In fact, you may have completed the original base game and understood only a portion of the events that you'd seen unfold over the title's lengthy narrative. And if that's the case, don't feel too bad, because it turns out that even the dev team thought that this was an aspect that needed to be addressed, and so announced that the game would be receiving a slew of DLC based around filling plot holes. Square Enix and the team were quick to point out that no content had been cut from the game to be added back in as DLC, but that they wanted as many people as possible to leave the experience feeling like they truly understood this epic tale, and boy howdy did they achieve this. With all of the DLC installed, Final Fantasy 15 became an experience that was elevated by its expansions. It truly became a heartfelt and very emotional narrative, and it allowed to hit with all of the emotional heft that it wanted to do so in the original base game, but unfortunately because of plot holes, just kind of went a little bit wide of the mark. This was a move that allowed people to be content with the content that they'd added in after. Yes, thank you. I will be taking my award for most clever line ever of 2022. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Number 5, an actual challenge. KIRBY Star Allies. Now this is a weird one, because I'm pretty sure that 99% of the world, excluding Sakurai, think that Kirby is not a badass. He's just a tiny little ball of pink fluff that does have some pretty terrifying powers if you're to believe any of the animations that Sonic for Hire put out there, but still isn't very threatening. I mean, Sakurai paints him as a badass. He thinks that he's on par with Mario in terms of like, oh yeah, he's a stoic hero. Weird, isn't it? Very weird. But my point is that for some reason, there's always a subset of Kirby fans that are astounded each and every time a new title drops, and it doesn't come with a masochist mode that will push them to their bloody limits, possibly proving that Sakurai really did manage to convince some that this delightful wee lad was actually more dangerous than a butter knife made of actual butter. But KIRBY Star Allies especially caught flack for being just way too easy, and as the multiplayer focus split the challenge between players even more, it was actually hard to argue. Or at least it was until the November 2018 update hit and changed things considerably. With this update, a brand new hyper-challenging mode was added in known as Heroes in Another World. Here, players had to take on revamped bosses at a ton of new locations that were insta-kill minefields. This was the challenge that the select few had been waiting for, and thanks to the ability to tag in new dream friends as you went, arguably delivered on the game's core premise of playing as a roster of heroes and villains far better than the base experience. Number 4, the Marauder gets nerfed. The Ancient Gods DLC. Okay friends, it is time to get out your salt licks and cover it with your leathery tongues, because we're about to talk about Doom Eternal, the Marauder, and difficulty settings. Now, before all of you absolute mules start saying nay to the idea of having such a calm and rational discussion about Doom, the Marauder, and difficulty sessions, I'm just going to talk over you with my red-hot brand of fiery justice. And no, that's not what I call my PB. The Marauder was a difficulty spike that few saw coming, and more than a few lamented as being the roadblock to their overall enjoyment. And while I personally disagree, but only because I loved the switch up to the formula that this one enemy presented, I can accept that it is never fun to meet a brick wall that you just can't get over. It's like me trying to get James Tabs to admit that we're actually friends. I'm never going to break through. I'm never going to break through the wall around your heart. That was the musical interlude. We haven't done that in a while. I think I'm actually getting like a proper sugar buzz. This is worrying me. Oh, dear me. Now, the outcry against the Marauder was significant, to say the least, and because the devs over at id or ID Software, depending on how you want to pronounce it, are a nice bunch, they decided to address this somewhat with the release of the Ancient Gods DLC, in which Hugo Martin and his team toned down the difficulty of the experience overall, citing that DLC levels are made for everyone who enjoy the Doom Eternal gameplay loop, and thus should reflect that in their challenge. The Marauder was just one of many elements that was tweaked, but it was by far the most notable. And while I'm sure that some will decry the challenge being lessened as a bad thing, what it did achieve was something more important than catering to the masochists. It allowed everyone to have a fair chance at completing this game. And trust me, no matter how you look at it, even if you are one of those types of people that says, oh, it should be challenging for challenging's sake, it's not about that. I hate to say it, it's not about you personally, it is about the franchise overall and having it succeed and making it slightly easier so that more people could complete the game, enjoy the experience and want to see more is definitely the right call for the franchise going forward. Difficulty should be accessible to everyone. There should be an ability to allow everyone to complete a game. That's how I stand on it, at least. If you're not part of that crew, then ask yourself, why are you gatekeeping, eh? Why are you gatekeeping? Number 3, adding in NPCs, Fallout 76. Now, I know that some of you might be thinking the Fallout entry that is pretty much obligatory when it comes to my lists was going to be talking about the ending of Fallout 3 and the fact that DLC was needed to let you allow the actual game to continue through, obviously, Anchorage allowed you to carry on playing the game and allowed you to tell your radiation immune or robot pals to step into the telephone booth of death in your place, which should have always been in there in the first place. But yeah, DLC fixed that. We know that. But what I'm going to try and do is something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about Fallout 76, and I'm going to try to do it with a hint of positivity. Now, it might take a while, but bear with me. So I think by now that most people know my thoughts on Fallout 76, but for those in the back, here is Wonderwall. I think that Fallout 76 is what happens when you posit an abattoir runoff hose above a well-beloved franchise. And it was painfully unfunny how the only thing that seemed to work on day one of this game was its bloody microtransaction store. It was an insult to fans, a huge disservice to the Fallout legacy, and was simply not worth your time. However, I will begrudgingly accept that the dev team didn't just let this game bleed out and die on the floor, they actually went back and they put the work in. And when it came to the Wastelanders expansion, they actually did deliver something pretty positive. Ugh, felt dirty just saying that. Yes, thanks to the Wastelanders expansion, we now have a title that is finally living up to the bare minimum that fans expected. I mean, there are still bugs and issues plaguing the experience, but it is in a much better state than before, and the added human NPCs, plus the greater and fairer spread of loot, plus the new faction quests, gave players a real reason to sink their teeth in. It may have taken many, many years to get to this point, but Fallout 76 is okay. And trust me, where it started, that is a massive compliment. Number 2, more death, please. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. As they are currently proving with their epic odyssey of backstabbing and just being brutally difficult, From Software are a dev team that just know how to create one thing and do it incredibly well. In fact, it's kind of fascinating how they made their own genre, perfected it, broke it back down again, perfected it again, broke it back down a third time, perfected it again, and just kept on doing so, again, and again, and again. It's endless cycle of madness. And yet, we can't get enough. Kudos to them. The 2 thumbs are back up for them. It's two seals. Arr, arr. It's not what seals sound like, I don't think. In short, it's amazing to see a development unit hone in on something so relentlessly, and it's led many to clamour for more as soon as their respective You Died simulator is over. And for the most part, FromSoft delivered more punishment via paid-for expansions that themselves went on to live in infamy as some of the hardest challenges going. However, this leads me to my one and only TED Talk talking point. Where the hell is the DLC for Sekiro? Seriously, a costume pack and a boss rush style mode isn't gonna cut it, as this was, for some, one of the finest video games From Software had ever created. This was the same steep difficulty curve but packaged as a more lithe and agile game, with many praising the Shinobi prosthetic as one of the greatest combat additions in a long old while. And it's even more astounding that the game didn't receive additional content when you consider that it was published by Activision, who, if they likely had their way, would have sold us half of the game and released the rest as a bloody season pass. Now, I know that we are very, very lucky that we got a lot of samurai action instead of shamurai action. That probably would have been the case if Activision got their grubby paws all over it, but still, it definitely stings that we didn't get any DLC for a game that desperately was crying out for it. And number 1, expansions as an apology. Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now, we all know the sorry state that EA Star Wars Battlefront 2 launched in, and for those in the back, here is Wonderwall Part 2. Just recycle the footage, James. Yeah, that. Containing some of the worst examples of loot box gambling, a much hyped but outrageously mediocre single-player experience that sacked off its one decent angle not 2 missions in, and an atrocious disregard for players' time through forcing them through literally hundreds of hours of grind to unlock one legendary character. To call the game a mess would be an insult to landfills. Coupled with an abysmal Reddit debacle that saw yet more negativity towards the company and the title, plus the world over being finally motivated to look into the predatory practices of loot boxes, EA and DICE had to move quickly to restore what little faith in the project was left. Now, while many companies would react by cutting out the offending content, cancelling roadmaps and letting the title limp towards an early death, DICE went into overdrive to deliver an experience that would be remembered for the right reasons. And as much as I truly despise EA for their handling of this product at launch, I have to say that come the end of things, on its last content update that was all free, I looked at this game and I was like, this is genuinely stunning. With space battles, vibrant and exotic locations, iconic characters, rebalanced unlocks, and classic weapons, Star Wars Battlefront 2 ended its run on a high that few would have thought possible, and I'm truly glad it did. And there we go, my friends. Those were 8 video games that needed DLC. Now let's ask James. Have I forgotten any, James? Any titles that you would have added in here as a bit of bonus content?
Oh, hi Jules. Yes, thank you. All I'm going to say, Super Mario Party for the Nintendo Switch. It had 4 maps at launch. Did they have any DLC? No. Instead, they brought out a brand new game for $60, which could have easily have just been DLC for the first game, but nah. Money.
So there we go. Consider this an 8.5 or a 9 entry. Look at that bonus content. We're always just giving here at WhatCulture.com. But anyway, that's been our video today. Hope you enjoyed it. And please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. And put your suggestions for next week's episode down there as well. If you want to chat to me further, you can do so over on Twitter at RetroJ0, or you can swing by Live and Let's Dice, where I do all of my streaming outside of work. And it'd be great to see you over there, my friends. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Sometimes in life, it can feel like we are reaching our limits. We're pushing ourselves to 100%, and it can be quite exhausting. But I just want to say that if you have aspirations to grow, it is always going to take that little bit of extra effort to push beyond the boundaries, to unlock that additional content that is within each and every one of us, to become a better person than we were this time last year. Because at the end of the day, that is all I want from you, to keep developing, to keep being that absolute ledge that I know you are. But sometimes it's going to need a little bit of extra help in order to get there. So I want to remind you that friends, family, professionals in the support industry, these people care about you and want you to do well, all right? They will unlock that additional content that is within us all. Big love to you, my friend. Now go out there and absolutely smash it. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.